You want the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
You can't handle the truth!
Well, we're giving you the Michigan Sports Truth, the show that is honest, reveals the facts, truth, and statistics, and does not mess around. Follow me, Taylor Phillips, on Twitter at DT2Phillips. Email me at TaylorGatorPhillips14@yahoo.com. Follow Ed Smith on Twitter at EdSmith313, and go to our website at MichiganSportsTruth.com. Also like our Facebook page, The Michigan Sports Truth on Spreaker, and join our group with the exact same name. The Michigan Sports Truth podcast is also available on iHeartRadio and SoundCloud. Also a subsidiary of Sports Radio Detroit, thus available on iTunes and Podbean. The views expressed by the host of this podcast are not opinion-based or for entertainment purposes. They are actually facts and truth, no matter if other people like it or not. It is the Michigan Sports Truth, and nothing can ever stop it from being correct.
Hey there, Michigan sports fanatics, and welcome to episode 234 of the Michigan Sports Truth on Spreaker, the football in the Mitten preview. I'm Taylor Phillips with my co-host Ed Smith. We preview Week 8 of college football and Week 7 of the NFL in 2016. Ed, how are you? Thanks so much for being on here with me. Ed? Ed, is something wrong here? Ed, I can't hear you. Ed, wake up. Oh, okay. I can't hear you. Just a minute. We're having technical difficulties here. I'm going to break a plate here! Keep speaking. Ed, can you hear me? Testing, testing. Can I hear you? Just a minute. We just got this started here and all right.
Are we better?
Yep, I can hear you now. We apologize for this.
Okay, that was wonderful.
All right. Okay, thanks so much for being on here with me, Ed. How are you?
Doing good, Taylor. Hopefully we won't have any more technical difficulties for the rest of this brief episode. I was trying to say that it's quite nice getting back to the usual schedule, wrap everything up, what was the weekend that was, and then here we are tonight, our usual Thursday football preview. So let's just get to it before we have any more audio issues.
Yeah, the next time we have that kind of issue, I'm gonna break a fucking plate. So
Yikes. Watch out for the glass.
yeah. So we got Michigan and Illinois on homecoming in Ann Arbor, Michigan State and the Spartans and the Terrapins in Maryland, CMU at Toledo, and Eastern versus Western. Also, the Lions welcoming the Redskins to wrap up their 3-game homestand. But first, let's preview Michigan here.
Touchdown, Michigan!
The Wolverines return from their bye week for homecoming. And they take on the Illinois Fighting Illini, who are 2-4 and 1-2 in the Big Ten. That kicks off at 3:30 on BTN. The Illini are coached by the Illini's head coach is Lovie Smith, formerly with the NFL's Chicago Bears. Now let's look at the injury report first before we preview this game. Michigan senior tailback Drake Johnson, as we mentioned before, was ready to return from getting run over by a forklift in a U of M track building. So he should be ready to go.
Slight correction on that. The forklift incident that I mentioned to you in the last episode that had occurred in the off season. Johnson was already playing, had started the season, but I believe Harbaugh mentioned that he had pulled a muscle during practice after one of the early games, hence him not being available or just not being used up until now. But Harbaugh says he's ready this week, that he's ready to go. So I'm just going to go by what the coach says, and that would be, our first signing of Drake Johnson in quite a few number of weeks.
All right, thank you very much, Ed. Now for Illinois, sophomore quarterback Chase Crouch may get the start for the second straight game because senior starting quarterback Wes Lunt was out last week versus Rutgers with a back injury, and there has been no determination on whether or not he'll return. For Crouch, he threw 6 of 14 for 92 yards, 1 touchdown, and one interception against Rutgers. That was it. Now, what to watch for? Illinois has allowed an average of 36.8 points per game in their 4-game losing streak before they beat the Scarlet Knights 24-7 last week. They got 3 defensive linemen here who are very tough. Senior middle linebacker Hardy Nickerson Jr., 58 tackles and 2 interceptions caught. Senior defensive end Carol Phillips, 11 tackles for losses, including 4 sacks. And senior defensive end Dwayne Smoot, 8 tackles for losses. For Michigan, they lead the nation in scoring defense with 10.3 points per game. Total defense with 212.8 yards per game, and passing defense with 113.7 yards per game. And also they are ranked 9th in rushing defense with 99.2 yards per game and has held 5 opponents to 14 or fewer points each. Now, your key to the game was maintaining focus. Michigan has to maintain focus and not get too cocky against those Illini.
Yeah, the key that I mentioned of maintaining focus, I think you could apply that to practically every single game the rest of the way. Because let's face it, the opponents on their schedule are quite far, very inferior, it's safe to say, in terms of how they match up player by player, position by position, unit by unit to Michigan. So, like I mentioned, Michigan should be, a solid, if not a heavy favorite in the remaining of their games until the matchup November 26th in Columbus against Ohio State. So, knowing that going into mind, it'll be very easy to lose, the game too much of a big head, underestimate your opponent, and it'll put you in a potential scare or just flat out upset you. So the key, not just for this game, but for the remaining of the second half, because essentially this is their second half. They had the bye week last week. It's near the midway, I think it is past the midway point now, essentially. So this is your second half starts now. So for the remainder of your second half of your game, so LSU, you're going to be favored. So with that, you've got to maintain your focus. Can't get too cocky. Can't get too overconfident. And also another thing is, there are some things you still have to work on, primarily on offensive end, that you didn't quite get right done against Rutgers. I know you're saying, well geez, how is it going to improve? I mean, for God's sake, they scored 78 points. Well, the thing is, a couple of things. Keep down the turnover. Then Think about 2011. Devion Smith had a pretty early big fumble early on in the game that gave Rutgers the ball in very solid, good territory. I think around Michigan's 30-yard line or so. So, fortunately, Rutgers is Rutgers, so they wouldn't be able to take advantage of it. But I think it's safe to say Illinois is much more respectable of a team and of an offense than Rutgers is, even though they're going up against a defense that was the consensus among many others, including the website, the statistic rather of S&P Plus. You can find that on the website footballoutsiders.com/stats/NCAA. But I digress. S&P Plus, which is essentially is close to a metric, an advanced metric of sorts regarding rankings and how you rank teams per unit and how they rank overall. Michigan is not only the number one ranked team, period, overall, but without question, they have the best defensive ranking at the very top of the S&P Plus ratio. If there is a weakness for this Michigan team, is of course their special teams. They're ranked 107th in out of all the 120 plus teams within the FBS. Now, obviously, that's mainly due to the horrendous issues they've had with their kicking game. But I would say Kenny Allen, for as much as a bad job that he's done with his place kicking and field goals, he's done a solid, if not great job with his punts, with the way he's done coverage and whatnot, pinning opponents deep, hanging them up enough where even if it's returnable, it doesn't get much of a big return. So if there's anything besides turnovers on offense that they need to worry about, is just fixing their kicking game. So in terms of how that all relates to keep maintaining focus, there'll also be a chance to show up some weaknesses, because let's face it, it's much more of probably be much more competitive than Rutgers. That's not saying much. Okay, that's like putting a piece of bread on top of bologna and saying, here, have at it. So with this game, though, which you would expect will probably be well in hand before middle of the third quarter, to be a good chance to get in some players, get some reps in, like you did against Rutgers, and also try to implement some things that could help you down the road. Whereas if it's a fourth and down, fourth and medium, fourth and long, you're nowhere near the 20 or so. Run out your field goal kicker. See if it's not Kenny Allen. See if it's the freshman Tice that they had tried to kick against Wisconsin, but he failed. There's also the freshman that gained some notoriety in the offseason, Quinn Norton. You may remember him from the time when Jim Harbaugh actually, slept over his house. True story. So I wouldn't be surprised if Norton gets a call to get a few kicks in. Again, because between now and LSU, Michigan's still, as monstrous as their defense is, they still have some weaknesses of their own that they have to fill up on and make sure it doesn't come back to bite them. So that's what I'm looking for. Maintain focus. Don't try to commit stupid turnovers. The defense, they're going to be fine. They're going to essentially carry you this whole game, may carry you for the majority of this second half. It's just going to be on the offense, not to put the team in bad spots. And if you have a chance, try a kick or two with your field goal unit. See to not only improve your standing, but also build confidence among your young players in that unit.
God damn it. I lost you again. Ed?
Hello?
Yep. Continue.
All right. What point was it that I went off that I might have lost contact?
Just about 10 or 15 seconds ago.
Okay, so I was able to get the main point across. Essentially, no injuries. Keep down on the turnovers, because you may not get so lucky the way you did against Rutgers. And try to get your kicking game a little bit more improved as we go on week to week, heading up to the collision course against Ohio State.
Yep, that's true. But I'm pretty sure they'll keep their focus. I'm pretty sure they'll maintain their focus, and if they do, the spread is 38 points and over-under is 56. Then I'm going to predict Michigan to win 42-10.
it's tempting to take the over because not just what they've done against Rutgers, but really what they've done against a lot of teams, save of course for Wisconsin, who gave Michigan their toughest fight this season. Of course, gave a hell of a fight to Ohio State last week, but nonetheless, obviously I expect Michigan to win this one. Will they cover the spread? It's a big spread. I say, they just get underneath. I think this one could be I'm thinking along lines you, Taylor. I think they'll get 40s. I'll say that I'm going to take the over on the over-under here, so I'll say Michigan 49 and Illinois 14.
Oh, man.
All right. I can take it if you can. So that's going to do it for Michigan. They kick off at 3:30 on BTN against Illinois. Keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, now for the struggling Michigan State Spartans.
Touchdown, MSU!
They are at the Maryland Terrapins at 7:30 on BTN. The Terrapins are 4-2 and 1-2 in the Big Ten. The Terps have won the first 4 of their games, 3 of them in dominating fashion, but then they suffered an ugly loss in the last 2 games, 38-14 to Penn State in Happy Valley and 31-10 to Minnesota at home. For the Spartans, of course, they've lost 4 straight, but their offense is coming on strong considering they put up 40 points versus Northwestern, whereas their defense is getting worse, having allowed 54. Now, we don't have any word on which quarterback Mark D'Antonio, the head coach, is going to start, Tyler O'Connor or Brian Lewerke or Damian Terry. But one key to the game is for the Spartans is to play for pride. The spread is a lousy 3 points, over under 51. So Ed, why don't you fill the audience in on the description of the key of the game?
Well, when I mentioned play for pride, I think it's quite obvious to know what I mean by that description, by that term, and by that word. If you have seen what has happened in Michigan State this season, it's been anything but prideful. It's been all out shameful. If it's not one issue with one week, it's another. If they're having trouble with their quarterback, if it's not that, then they can't run the ball, or their offensive line stinks, or they have discipline issues, which is very shocking for a Mark D'Antonio coach team, or just whatever catastrophe you can think of, or like I said, like we've seen, the defense. So whatever catastrophe you can think of as of late that has plagued this team, it has plagued them in spades. And that doesn't get any better because it seems like to be a similar situation to what it was against Indiana on the road at night against a program that hasn't quite had quite a few number of signature wins in recent years. That's what it reminds me of in a sense. So if you want to break down not just the stats of how both teams match up statistically, it seems neck and neck in terms of the offense. It seems neck and neck in terms of offense. At least Maryland averaging over 400, MSU managing just over 380. And Maryland does have the advantage in terms of scoring. Their average is +8 over MSU's. And as well as you take a look at the S&P rankings, I'm going to go back to that. Might go back to them often, just letting you all guys know in advance. It seems that Maryland, they're ranked offensively as 69th, whereas MSU was ranked at 77th. Again, another, as evidenced by the numbers that we saw in the head-to-head preview matchup by team, Maryland has that advantage there. Defensively, they're ranked 44th, MSU ranked 59th. So I think that's where it could come down to right then and there as to who has the better defense. It seemed like Michigan State, again, another key part of their identity with Mark D'Antonio over these past several years. Not just how they can run the ball at you, but they can play phenomenal defense. But obviously, with the players that they've lost last year, they were going to take a step back, not just on defense, but as a team. But I think the shocking part was seeing how much of a step they've taken back. They weren't expecting to lose at home 3 in a row. They weren't expecting to get destroyed, lose by double digits in all 3. What we saw against Wisconsin, BYU, and of course, notoriously last week against Northwestern. So, in terms of what you have left in front of you, what's already lost is obviously a chance to play for a Big Ten title, play for a big-time bowl game or whatever the case may be. Now, in terms of what you have in front of you, what goals do you still have in front of you to make this give you some semblance of a silver lining to say, hey, no, this was not nowhere near what we're used to seeing, but it still gives us a chance to see what a good future that we can have with these players and obviously underneath this coach. Well, you have plenty of prime chances. You can still win enough games to get you to a bowl game. I don't know, whether it be the Buffalo Wild Wings or the Little Caesars Bowl or whatever the case may be. But hey, that's one goal. Try to get to a bowl game. You don't want to fall back into further mediocrity or what you've already gone through this year. And also, in terms of playing for pride, after this one, it's the big boy. You got Michigan at your place at noon in East Lansing on the 29th. Especially now that what we've been through, this is essentially your season right here. This is your national championship, however you want to look at it. So if to say you want to be up and motivated for that game is a heavy understatement. And of course, they down the line, a few weeks after that, they have a chance to ruin Ohio State's year. And that's again another thing to always take into consideration. So in terms of what they can still accomplish, Michigan State, it's not a complete lost cause of the season yet. Still got Michigan and still got Ohio State to look forward to, both those games at home. But if you want to be more realistic instead of optimistic, seeing how these teams have performed collectively, line them up side by side, I would be very worried about those two teams. When we get into Michigan State next week, I'll go into full, autopsy detail of that, where it's right now. But for the case for MSU, as they try to focus this week on Maryland, play for pride, play for whatever dignity that you have left, to maintain whatever dignity you have left of this season, to build a better, strong foundation for next year. And hey, get yourself psyched up because next week is Michigan.
I got one key of the game for the Spartans if they want to beat Maryland on the road. Improve their defense. They allowed 54 points against the Northwestern Wildcats, and I'm pretty sure the defense is getting an earful from the coaching staff, including the head coach Mark D'Antonio and the defensive coordinator and the defensive lineman coach and the secondary defense coach. All those other coaches.
One thing that could help them is they got to get off the field on third down. How many third down conversions they give to Northwestern last week? 10, 11? It was a 10 of 16 range, I believe, for Northwestern on third downs. So that's one key that you want to prove on defensively. That is definitely that.
Yeah. So, considering Michigan State put up 40 points against Northwestern, which is still pretty high, just not as high as 54, the amount they gave up. I think if their defense improves and their offense keeps rolling, I think Michigan will squeeze out a victory 34-31 at Maryland.
So basically you're saying Michigan State will win and they will cover. I think their offense, now granted, as horrible as their defense looked, at least their offense showcased some spark, some semblance, some heartbeat of life there. So I do agree with you with that. As in terms of how it will go overall, their defense is still going to give a lot of big plays. It's going to put in a lot of big trouble here, a lot of big spots here. But knowing who needs to win this game more and how essential it is, how desperate it will be, to help give you some sense of sanity for your season, and knowing what you're likely heading into next week, I do agree with you. I say, even though I've been burned so many times by them already, I do say Michigan State gets it done. it'll be a very, very close affair. I will say MSU 31, Maryland 30.
Whoa, very, very close.
Yeah, we're looking at potentially either a late touchdown given up or a last-second defensive stop, in my view, because, like I said, MSU's defense, they haven't, fooled anybody. But I'm giving them this one last olive branch because, listen, next weekend against Michigan, in the words of Brock Lesnar, it's. I'll just say this: it's going to be ugly, people.
Oh yeah. Before I move on to the MAC, the Mid-American Conference, I want to update those out there in baseball land. The Chicago Cubs held on to beat the Los Angeles Dodgers 8-4 to go up 3-2 in the National League Championship Series. Saturday at 4 is Game 6 at Wrigley Field. I want all of you to tune in as the Cubs are one win away from reaching the World Series for the first time in a long time. A very long time.
I believe first time since 47, correct?
Yep. And the winner of that series will play the Cleveland Indians in the World Series.
Right. I'm sorry, it might have been 45 because I do know that's when, they last played, The last time the Cubs were in a World Series game was in 45, and conveniently, they faced the Tigers. Of course, they lost because they haven't won one since 1908, but that was also the year where the infamous legend of the Billy Goat curse was established right then and there. We all know the story. You know how it goes. If you don't, long story short, look it up online. It's told in numerous Cubs lore and documentaries of Curse of the Billy Goat and whatnot, how it connects to why the Cubs haven't been able to even get to the World Series, let alone win one in over 100 years. It's not just Steve Bartman, folks. And by the way, that guy gets a lot of unnecessary blame as well. It goes far beyond that. So, but for the Cubs, they look damn strong this year. They got the best record in the league, outstanding pitching, great hitting. Of course, you got a hell of a manager in Joe Madden. Of course, you got an outstanding general manager in Theo Epstein, pulling the strings. Wish you could see that around these parts for our baseball squad, but I digress. So they're one win away. If they get it done, what better way to get you back to the World Series than do it with a win at home in Wrigley? So, see how it goes for them.
Oh yeah, I can already preview at least something from here forward. With that being said, it's time for me to move on to my Central Michigan Chippewas.
Touchdown, Central Michigan!
They are going to Toledo and taking on a tough Rockets team at noon. The Rockets are 5-1 and 2-0 in the MAC. And they are coming off 2 dominating wins, 52-17 over Fresno State and 45-3 over Maine. The second best team in the Mid-American Conference, apparently behind the Western Michigan Broncos, who are 20th ranked, which I'll get to afterwards. Quarterback matchup should be a good one. Cooper Rush, 18 touchdown passes and 7 interception throws versus junior quarterback Logan Woodside, 24 touchdown passes and only 4 interception throws. Other players to watch for offensively are senior running back Kareem Hunt and junior wide receiver Cody Thompson. Kareem Hunt, that is, the running back, has 132 carries for 653 yards and 5 touchdowns. Cody Thompson has 29 catches for 722 yards and 5 touchdowns. So the Rockets, led by those 3, can be an offensive threat. Look for X factors in those too. The offensive stats totally favor Toledo, and the defensive stats mostly favor my CMU Chippewas, but they've allowed a few more points per game than the Rockets defense has allowed. My keys to the game: CMU's defensive line has to penetrate Toledo's offensive line and get to Woodside more. Cooper Rush has to cut back on the interception throws. And, of course, the secondary defense, back to the defense. The secondary defense has to bring their A game against the Rockets' receiving department. And finally, last but not least, the Chippewas have to use a new field goal kicker. I'm sick and damn tired of Brian Evie missing so many field goal kicks this season. Now the spread, 11 points, over and under, 62. My prediction, if CMU uses Brian Evie again, I'm gonna become more numb to it, and this will be more detrimental to the outcome of this one. And I think the Rockets will use their home field advantage to exploit CMU's mistakes, especially in the field goal unit department. Brian Evie's going to keep missing those field goals against the Rockets unless the Chippewas use a new kicker, because Brian Evie can't split the football in between the uprights. Can't split the uprights. He can't kick field goals. And the Rockets' offense is going to match up well against the CMU defense. The Chippewas are going to use Cooper Rush more and Corey Willis and Jesse Kroll and Devin Spalding. And they're going to fight the good fight. But I believe they're going to come up 3 points short. I'm going to pick Toledo to win 31-28.
I also think Toledo's winning as well. Unfortunately, Tyler, I don't think it'll be as close as you would hope it to be. I think it's going to be very similar to what we saw in the Western game. So by that logic of what I'm seeing, I think Toledo will take this one by around a score. I want to say, let's go 52-31, or maybe 52-28. Between 24 and 31, I expect CMU to score, but Toledo's offense is just far too much for them to handle. Quite possibly outside of Western, the best offense in the whole MAC. So I'm going to say Toledo by a wide margin. So that's why hence my score, 52, and at the most, I think Central can score, probably be 28 or 31. But I think Toledo's defense is very, very solid as well. So I think they're going to hold CMU to 28. It's going to be ugly. Look ugly, it seems, but, Toledo's a damn good team in the MAC this year.
Yeah, just not quite as good as Western, who is 20th ranked. And I got to look up that schedule, that MAC schedule, and see if Toledo plays Western this year, or if they already did. Speaking of the Western Michigan Broncos, they kick off at 3:30 at Waldo Stadium in Kalamazoo against the Eastern Michigan Eagles. Another in-state rivalry game, matchup, if you will. Quarterback matchup, Zach Terrell of the Western Michigan Broncos versus Todd Porter of EMU. Terrell, 17 touchdown passes and 0 interceptions. Todd Porter of the Eastern Michigan Eagles, 7 touchdown passes, 9 interceptions.
He freaking sucks.
I think the Broncos are a formidable challenge for the Eagles totally, and they'll use their home field advantage. And every weapon they have possible to rout another opponent in Eastern Michigan. I'd say the Broncos win 49-17.
See, I think it's going to be. I think Western will probably have about 40 or so, but I think they're going to hold Eastern to much less. This is another chance to showcase flex their inner muscle within, not just within the conference, but especially within the state as well. So I expect PJ Flett to keep rowing the boat, and they're going to roll the boat all over Eastern. I say Eastern by a score of 42, or let's go 48 to 3, 48-3 Western.
Wow. All right, that's it for college football. Now we go to the pros.
Touchdown, Detroit Lions!
The Lions wrap up their 3-game homestand at Ford Field against the Washington Redskins, who are 4-2 and 2-0 on the road. The Redskins are road warriors here. Injury report comes first. We got 8 players for the Lions questionable. Eric Ebron, Tahir Whitehead, Ziggy Ansah, offensive tackle Corey Robinson, DeAndre Levy, Theo Riddick, Haloti Ngata, and Dwayne Washington. Still no update on Amir Abdullah or Corey Fuller. Apparently they're both out for the season, but still no confirmation yet. For Washington, 2 players out, tight end Derek Carrier and wide receiver Josh Doxson. Questionable, tight end Jordan Reed and wide receiver Deshaun Jackson. Keep an eye on those 2. Matthew Stafford outmatches Kirk Cousins statistically in touchdowns, 14-9, and interceptions. Stafford has only thrown 4, and Cousins has thrown 6. The total passing yards this season are pretty much even between the 2. Cousins just barely leads 1,695 passing yards to Stafford's 1,648. The Lions' secondary defense has to shape up. They have allowed 281.5 yards per game. The Redskins' secondary defense has allowed 259.0 yards per game. So that's a key factor. The Lions' secondary defense, as usual, is pretty bad out there. So we got 2 keys to the game: secondary defense and line play. The offensive line versus the defensive line. Ed?
Yeah, especially what we saw last week with Detroit shuffling, mainly due to injuries, of course. You saw Graham Glasgow, the rookie out of Michigan, perform on the left side of the guard, whereas Laken Tomlinson, filling in for the injured Larry Warford, was moved to the right. Now, I happened to catch a glance on, I think it was either 4 or 7. I think it was 7. Brad Galley was reporting. He mentioned something to the fact that Laken Tomlinson was moved down in the depth chart, potentially to give Graham Glasgow some more snaps. So again, we could be seeing another potential shuffle along the already shuffled and beleaguered offensive line. Yet, despite their issues and problems that they haven't done too bad of a job at allowing too many sacks. Probably in a couple of games where they looked absolutely dreadful. But for the most part, they've looked adequate in some instances, if barely. You have to wonder how that would work against this Washington defensive line. Now, conversely, on the opposite side of the ball, we still don't know the status of Haloti Ngata. He did miss last week's game, but we do have Ziggy Ansah back, and I think he's a week removed from his return game, so I think it'll be more of the rust to have been played off. He'll be up to his usual self and getting towards the quarterback. Besides that, there's Devin Taylor, there's Kerry Hyder, there's the rotation of guys that they can use, or the guys they have left on the defensive line that they can use, like one of them being Sean Robinson, their draft pick from Alabama this year. So I think the terms of who has the better defensive line could be Detroit. It's just a question mark of their offensive line could keep this a very close competitive game. Secondary play, it's quite obvious to see. The Lions, in terms of giving up tight end reception touchdowns, it has been their absolute biggest key weakness. Over the past season and a half, it seems like almost every other game, a tight end is catching a touchdown pass against Detroit. It happened last week against St. Louis, and Jordan Reed, one of the best catching tight ends in the league. He's on Washington now. He's listed questionable. I do expect him to play. Same thing with Deshaun Jackson. One is still one of the most, in my view, one of the most explosive playmakers in the whole league. So, knowing how this line secondary, sometimes they come up with big plays, but also most times big plays are run on them. They get gashed for big plays. It could be a similar game that what we saw last week against St. Louis, where Both offenses had to match each other, and I do have the faith in Matthew Stafford that he'll be able to put his team in good spots offensively. It's going to come down to, can he get good protection from his offensive line again, and B, can his receivers make sure they have less a case of the Butterfingers, because remember, he had 4 drops from his receivers last week, well over 40. I think they're one of the top teams in the league, top 3 or 4 teams in terms of drops in the league this year. So if they want to have a better shot of matching Washington point for point, they got to have fewer drops. So if you want to call that another mini key, there it is right there. So between that, I could see this being another competitive, close game right down to the wire.
Yeah, it's gonna be a really close one, just like it was against the St. Louis Rams. Last week was a seesaw, like we mentioned before on Tuesday, but it's going to be more offensive, especially in the receiving department, because both offenses are going to exploit the weaknesses of the secondary defenses, and it's going to keep happening, especially on third down conversions.
That'll be a very key stat. This is as to see if we can get better defense production on third down, for sure.
Yep. So I'll let you predict first.
In terms of ranking of what we're seeing here, well, not ranking per se, but I think the numbers speak for themselves. Seems to be 2 evenly matched teams. I'd go for the fact that the Lions, they're trying to. They are at home. This is the final game of their homestand. This seems like a winnable game, even though Washington, like you mentioned, Taylor, they're undefeated on the road. I think the crowd knows that Ford Field can play a factor, and I think the fact that they're facing, in my view, high caliber, not tier 1, but I would say definite tier 2 in Matthew Stafford, the way he's stepped, especially how he's been this year. Between that and I think you're going to see a much more impactful defensive line performance from Detroit. Those factors I take in consideration, and the fact that, as much as, gash plays are ran on them, Detroit's secondary can and has shown that they can come up with big plays at crucial spots. So between those elements, I am predicting, believe it or not, a Lions victory. The cover is -2 in favor of Detroit, over under 50. I say Detroit 28, Washington 24.
Okay. I'm gonna pick the Lions to win 31-27. So that's it for the football preview. Now it's time for 5 questions.
Well, as long as we don't have any more technical issues, let them rip, Taylor.
Yep.
It's time for 5 questions on the Michigan Sports Truth on Spreaker.
At least the board's working. Question number 1, will Drake Johnson be a key contribution to the Wolverines the rest of 2016?
I say yes. I say yeah. The reason why is because knowing how Jim Harbaugh likes to run his offense, you can never have enough running backs, and the more the merrier, especially when you want to get down to the wire in late game situations, deep in crucial games where you need a running back here to run the clock out, or use him here on a third down, or use him for this key situation like on a screen pass or whatever. So you can never have enough running backs. Also, again, another chance to add an additional weapon to the offense to take the pressure off of Wilton Speight, who, if you're a Michigan, if you don't have too much confidence in, you can still rest easy knowing he's got the tight ends, he's got the wideouts, and of course he has a plethora of running backs to just hand the ball off to take that pressure off him. But still, I think, you can still trust Speight in some instances. I think he started to earn my trust a little bit. Of course, he made the big throw, the big play. That was the game-winning score against Wisconsin. So, little by little, bit by bit, with Wilton Spade. It's not Jake Root, a full-blown Jake Rudolph, how the finished product became at the end of last year. But if he finishes just a shade below that, I wouldn't have a problem with. But yes, I will say it is definitely a good key adjustment to have Drake Johnson back with the team, and we just hope he stays healthy.
Next question.
Question number 2, will we see Illinois sophomore quarterback Chase Crouch start this Saturday?
I think it's safe to assume yes, because Luntz is, back injuries are not that easy to come back from with just with a snap of your fingers. So I do expect Crouch will get the start, and I think he could be a little bit of a tighter of a hassle than Lunt, because Crouch is more, in the words of as described by MGoBlog.com, more of a dual threat speed option look. So then again, when you have athleticism like that can always help you out in key situations, scrambling situations. So that'll be a bit of a minor intangible to look out for. So I expect that Crouch will get the start.
Next question.
Question number 3, will the Spartans start and stick with Damian Terry or platoon with him, Tyler O'Connor, and Brian Lewerke? Or who do you think will start?
I think Lewerke will get the start because I don't think D'Antonio. I don't know. I just think D'Antonio won't give. Especially, I thought Terry had an audition, and when he threw that interception against BYU, he kind of failed it. I do, however, hope if anything happens, he is the de facto backup and not Tyler O'Connor, because O'Connor has just not been that good this year at all. So I expect D'Antonio will go with Lewerke to start. But as well as what I hope and what I expect to see, I think I expect Antonio was still going to have O'Connor as your designated backup, which I think is the wrong decision. But still, not my call. I'm not the coach, but I think Lewerke would get the start this Saturday.
All right.
Next question.
Question number 4, can the Spartans offense keep scoring more points like they did against Northwestern in a losing cause last week?
I think they can. I mean, I think they're going to be facing a slightly better defense in Maryland against Northwestern. But in terms of their offensive coordinator, I think their offensive coordinator, Dave Warner, has done something right. If you're seeing, them being able to put up, the amount of points that they did. Now, some of it, most you can argue, it came in garbage time, but I wouldn't make that much of a case because at one point it was 33-31. And then the unfortunate, mishappening of the special teams unit failing you with the kickoff return and ensuing play to Northwestern. So their offense could definitely keep them in the game. And so by the logic of how they were able to perform until their special teams and their defense continued to fail them against Northwestern, as well as by their own mistakes, turnovers, interceptions of that nature, yes, I think MSU on paper has the capability to continue the scoring trend that we saw last week against Northwestern. So, yes.
Next question.
And finally, question number 5, which secondary defense will prove weaker at Ford Field this Sunday, Lions or Redskins?
Well, close, but as evidenced by my pick of Detroit, I do say Washington's defense will, just slightly have a bit of a lapse of sense. Stafford is going to be able to find make some throws in key and crucial spots, and just use his athleticism to help him move around, get him set up in broken plays. And again, it's not necessarily going to be the throw the ball down the field and pin one for a big gain. It's going to be the yards after catch, yards after contact. What we saw last week, Golden Tate to be the facilitator of that with his yards after catch speed and whatnot. So I do think, even though Washington, they're going to get a lot of big plays over what I consider to be a very below average Detroit secondary that somehow finds a way to make big plays when it matters most. I do expect the fact that they're, since we're seeing a better quarterback in terms of quarterback matchup, Stafford will be able to take advantage of the weaknesses that is in Washington's secondary, and that will lead to the Lions getting the victory.
All right. Just make sure you keep catching that football that goes to the wide receivers out there, especially the Lions. But we'll see
that
what
would help.
Yep. So, for all the listeners and fans out there, if you want to answer those questions, just replay the episode and answer them in the comment bank below this episode. That wraps up episode 234 of the Michigan Sports Truth on Spreaker, the football and the Mitten preview. Ed, thanks so much again for your help. I'll talk to you again on episode 235 on Tuesday when we recap the weekend that was, including football, the Red Wings, and we don't have any Pistons action because the Pistons have all week off until next Wednesday when they wrap up their when they begin their regular season, when they tip it off against the Toronto Raptors at Air Canada Center. Also, we got a little bit of Tigers news on J.D. Martinez.
So stay tuned for that one, folks, and Taylor, I'll see you then.
All right. So before we sign off, I want to remind everyone to share this podcast and share this episode and our entire podcast on social media. Have their friends share that as well, and follow me on Spreaker as Taylor Phillips online at Spreaker.com, because I want to tell them that the Michigan Sports Truth podcast here on Spreaker is in search of local advertising sponsors. If anyone has a business that's interested in sponsoring this program, please email me at taylorgatorphillips14@yahoo.com or privately message me on Facebook or Twitter. You can also follow Sports Radio Detroit on Twitter at Sports Radio DET and like their Facebook page and join their Facebook group. Also find their podcasts available on iTunes and Podbean. For Ed Smith, I'm Taylor Phillips. If there's anything you fans want more or less about our podcast, please let us know. Follow us on Twitter at DT2Phillips with 2 L's and at EdSmith313. Also like our Facebook page, The Michigan Sports Truth on Spreaker, and join our Facebook group with the same name. TTFN, ta-ta for now.
Bon appétit.